here. Here I'm standing closer to the back of the house looking toward the street. It's very hard packed gravel right now. It's probably not very pervious, and it's pretty wide up here on the west side. It's narrower up toward the street. This is a pretty straightforward application. Right now we've got the asphalt and a lot of gravel. There's a concrete strip here. You can't really see it. It's under the leaves. It's not in great shape, but they would like to retain that concrete strip right next to the house to this back porch area here. And this would be the existing walkway. And then these are the two concrete tracks that are proposed. This is pretty straightforward. The tracks are 36 inches wide, which is a little bit wider than a historic two-track driveway would have been, which distinguishes them from historic two-track driveways, which can be an important historic feature in the district. The driveway is 69 feet long, and they do have a grass planting strip proposed on all sides of the two tracks, which is appreciated. They're going to send the water runoff toward the street, plant something in the middle, and then keep this area green and restore a little planting strip between the concrete ribbons. So staff recommends, well, I guess I should go through the standards. From the Secretary of the Interior standards that best apply, number 1 says a property will be used as it was historically or be given a new use that requires minimal change to its distinctive materials, features, spaces, and spatial relationships. Number 2 says the historic character of a property will be retained and preserved. The removal of distinctive materials or alteration of features, spaces, and spatial relationships that characterize a property will be avoided. Number 9 says that new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. From the Secretary of the Interior's guidelines for building site, recommended is retaining the historic relationship between buildings, landscape features, and open space. Not recommended is introducing new construction onto the building site which is visually incompatible in terms of size, scale, design, materials, color, and texture, or which destroys historic relationships on the site. So staff's opinion is that the concrete's an appropriate material. The two-track design is traditional, well distinguished by its width. The design minimizes the amount of imperviousness and returns some compacted gravel to grass. They also report that they are having problems with ice and snow and mud. So about 3 seasons out of the year, they're having trouble with this driveway, and that's the reason for the request. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thatcher. So Commissioners Beeson and Keano, we're on the review committee. Would you like to start the report and recommendations?
Sure. Not too much to add to staff's report. It's pretty straightforward and thorough report. I did ask the homeowners, if they use one entrance more than the other, and it seems they use them both pretty equally and frequently. So I think it would be much to their benefit to have a nicely paved walkway that's clear of the mud and ice in the later seasons along the house. And I think in general it would be much improved to do the work that they're proposing.
Yeah, and I'd say we looked around in the neighborhood for some other two-track, and there wasn't a lot of two-track immediately in that area, but there was some old driveway work, but nothing substantial. Most of it was done prior to lots of the work in this area in terms of our purview, in which the pavement was probably done. It was mostly driveways that were solid concrete in the area. All right. Would the applicant please come forward, provide your name for the record, and sign in? And if you have anything to add to the staff report, please do so.
Well, I'm Dave Sedgwick. I'm here with Martha, my wife. I think Jill did a very good job summarizing our proposal. We'd very much like to do it because it would improve the aesthetics of the driveway. And there are some houses in the neighborhood that have two tracks. We think it would fit in very nicely. And we're also concerned, as Jill mentioned, that we have a lot of trouble in the wintertime, springtime. In the spring, when it rains, it's basically a muddy swamp, especially in the back towards the back door. And in the winter, it ices over. I actually fell twice in the driveway last winter, and Martha fell once. So you're very eager to have a usable walkway next to the house that we can keep reasonably clear of snow and ice. So that's one factor for us. Other than that, I think Jill did a very nice job summarizing what we'd like to do, and so I think you've got a good vision of our proposal.
All right, thank you. Make sure you sign in.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
Good. All right, commissioners, do you have any questions for the application? All right, moving on to the public hearing. Are there members of the public who would like to speak on this agenda item? I'm guessing not. And now you can close the public hearing portion, and the applicant may please be seated. Thank you.
Okay.
Would any commissioners like to make a motion on the application? Moved by Commissioner Rockland.
I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application of 542 4th Street, a contributing property in the Old West Side Historic District, to install a two-track driveway as proposed. The work is compatible in exterior design, arrangement, texture, material, and relationship to the surrounding resources and meets the Ann Arbor Historic District design guidelines for paved areas and landscape features and the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, in particular standards 1, 2, and 10, and the guidelines for building site.
Support.
Seconded by Commissioner White. Is there discussion on the motion? All right, let's move to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, please say no. All right, the motion carries. Your application has been approved, and you will receive written notification from staff. Please note that you must apply for any required permits from the city before beginning your project.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. All right, moving on to the next item, F2.
F2 is an application at 448 5th Street for solar panels. It's in the Old West Side Historic District. This two-story brick colonial revival front gabled house first appears in the 1905 city directory. The occupant is listed as a carpenter, Albert Nordsman. The following year, bottler George Volker and his wife Catherine were the residents. And in 1910, widow Marie Dupper and her two daughters were sharing the house with the Volkers. It's got an interesting beer history. The Volkers lived in the house through 1915. And Mrs. Dupper until 1931. There's a picture of George here. I'm sorry to our viewing audience, I don't have a picture of George with his horse Sam, who worked for Dupper's beer distribution in the barn across the street, which is now the site of the Ba Elementary Playground. On this house, a small rear addition was approved by the HDC in 2011, and a new dormer in 2007. And a one-story addition on the front of the house was approved by the HDC in 1994. House is on 5th Street, south of Liberty and north of Jefferson, and the applicant is seeking HDC approval to install a solar array on the south-facing roof of the main body of the house. It is this roof surface right here that we are discussing today. It's this one here, and then it jumps over the dormer, and then see this is a lower roof surface back here that is also proposed to get solar panels. That one I probably would have allowed as a staff approval because it's pretty much out of sight from the street if that was the only roof surface that they were putting it on. But no, this is a pretty prominent ave, thus it comes to the commission. This is the back of the house. The solar panels would be going on this side. This is the south. This is facing west. They've got a lot of meters and things going on right now. There were some questions from the review committee about how hookups things would be routed off the back of the house, but we'll get to that in a minute. This is the other side, just for fun, because this is a beautiful house, and I love walking around it. The solar array, you can see, would go here. This is the ridge of the roof, and it would be on the sunny side, not surprisingly. Looks like there are, 12 panels on the east side and 9 panels on the west side. There's a lot of technical information with the application in the packet. The proposed panels are black on black, which is always appreciated, and it is a highly visible location. But it is, these are clustered into a group, and I do think that the materials and design are compatible. We've got a longer history with solar now, and solar panels on roofs are not quite as unusual as they used to be, and these will seem, I think, to recede pretty well. From the Secretary of Interior standards, number 2 says the historic character of a property will be retained and preserved. Removal of distinctive materials or alteration of features, spaces, and spatial relationships that characterize a property will be avoided. I already read number 9 to you. Number 10 says new additions and adjacent or related new construction will be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property will be unimpaired. Solar panels on a non-original roof surface are something that is very removable. From the Secretary of the Interior's guidelines for roofs, not recommended is changing the configuration of a roof by adding new features such as dormer windows, vents, or skylights that historic character is diminished. That's a key to think of when considering this. From the guidelines for mechanical equipment, not recommended is failing to consider the weight and design of new mechanical equipment, so that as a result, historic structural members or finished surfaces are weakened or cracked. I included the building permit, the solar permit application in the packet that has more information on what the building department is looking for when they're considering this project. From the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for solar panels, it's appropriate to mount solar panels at grade or on ground pole mountings. In the absence of an appropriate ground-based mounting location, panels should be mounted on side or rear-facing roof surfaces. Also, it's appropriate to install mechanical or surface equipment on the roof related to the solar units and their related devices so that they are inconspicuous from the public right-of-way and do not damage or obscure character-defining features. Also appropriate is for sloped roof installations to install solar panels parallel to and within 8 inches of the roof surface. This is a pretty straightforward application. Staff believes that the materials and design of the solar panels are compatible with the existing structure, neighboring buildings, and the surrounding historic district, and meet both the Secretary of the Interior standards and guidelines and the Ann Arbor Historic District guidelines. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, Commissioner Keanu and myself were on the review committee for this one as well. Surprise, surprise. And do you want to add anything?
Just that there was that discussion of where the lines, or how the lines would be routed back towards the cluster of meters back there. And it seemed like there was some question of how many panels on the rear portion, that layout. It seemed unclear between the homeowner. That was the final layout, but they're on the rear portion, so probably not a huge concern
No.
for our purview.
We did note that the existing meters and how they were attached to the existing walls were actually attached at the bricks. So we wanted to make sure that any new lines that get added are attached at the mortar joints. So we did want to highlight that. All right, anything else? All right. Would the applicant please come forward and provide your name for the record and sign in?
So the contractor called today and said he was not coming. I was hoping that homeowners would show up, but it sounds like they're not here.
Okay. So we'll skip that. Moving on to the public hearing. Are there members of the public who would like to speak on this agenda item? All right. So commissioners probably don't have questions, so we're probably just going to close the public hearing portion of the application. And then are there any commissioners who would like to make a motion? Commissioner Cannon.
I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 448 Fifth Street, a contributing property in the Old West Side Historic District, to install black-on-black solar array on the south-facing roof as proposed. The work is compatible in exterior, design, arrangement, texture, and material in relationship to the rest of the building and the surrounding area, and meets the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, in particular standards 2, 9, and 10, and the guidelines for roofs, energy efficiency, and mechanical systems, as well as the Ann Arbor Historic District design guidelines, particularly as they pertain to solar installations.
Support.
Seconded by Commissioner White. Is there any discussion on the motion? Commissioner Rocco.
Okay, well, first of all, I like the black-on-black panel. I think that is preferred, and so I appreciate that that's what they're going to go with. It definitely will blend in better. I wonder, there's a lot of information in here, and I didn't see anywhere where it said that they were going to install them parallel to the roof surface and within 8 inches of the surface. That's in the standards, and it's probably in there, but I was looking for it and couldn't find it. But I think that's important, that if it's not in there, that maybe we can add it to the motion or something, because I think that's probably what
That's
they're
important. That's their
planning on
intention.
doing,
Yeah.
but just in case they're
Make it
not.
explicit.
It's a side-facing roof, so according to our standards, that's an appropriate roof face to put these on. I guess the question of, will this diminish the historic character? That's another standard. And I think that it is a good question, is does installing solar panels in this instance, does it diminish the historic character? It's definitely, could be a question for discussion. I feel like we have the solar panel standards, and if you're following the solar panel standards, then you're, probably getting to where you need to be in terms of getting approved. But I am curious if anyone thinks that this is, diminishing the historic character, and, is that a broader discussion, or is that, discussion for this project here?
Any further discussion? I can add on that. To me, especially a non-original roof surface, to me, solar panels serve as a roof surface.
Yeah.
And they're just as removable as a non-original roof surface in my mind. So as it pertains to kind of, does it diminish its historic character? And, I would say with the non-original roof also diminishes its historic character. So I think solar panels is not a whole lot different in my mind. But, it certainly changed the way that you read a building when you see bright things that have some reflective quality to them. But by and large, this is trying to keep an historic building for the long term. So I balance it with that. Any other discussion?
Well, I think the characteristic of that roof plane is that it's this expansive planar surface, and we're just kind of adding another layer hopefully within our guidelines, the criteria of that, and
Yeah, but we
kinda
should,
similar surface.
we should probably
Add
change
that.
the motion. So you made the motion, right?
Yes.
So a
What
friendly
were the
amendment.
specifics of that? Thank you, Ms. Thatcher. All right, I'll read the whole thing, or
Start from.
why not? Starting from, I'm amending the motion, starting, application at 448 Fifth Street, a contributing property in the Old West Side Historic District to install a black-on-black solar array on the south-facing roof on the condition that the panels are parallel to the roof and no more than 8 inches from the roof surface. The work, as conditioned, is compatible in exterior design, arrangement, texture, material, and relationship. The rest of the motion is the same.
Support.
Seconded by Commissioner White. All right. Any further discussion on that amended motion now? All right. Let's move to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes.
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 All those opposed, please say no. All right. The motion carries. The application has been approved, and the applicant will receive written notification from staff, and they must note that they have to apply for any required permits from the city before beginning their project. All right. Next item, F3.
Next up is 332 East William. It is the East William Historic District, and this building is known as the Washtenaw Apartments, was constructed in 1925 and replaced a large two-story dwelling on the site. The 3.5-story red brick apartment building features a stone base and trim, decorative stone front entry with Corinthian pilasters and faux arches, and 6/1 on the front elevation, double-hung windows in pairs and singles. The building is U-shaped with a narrow center courtyard for light and ventilation. There's a little more information in the staff report from a Grace Shackman article on apartment buildings. And in October of 2017, the HDC approved an application to alter 9 window openings near ground level. Sites on the south side of East William Street, east of Hamilton Place, and west of South Division. And the applicant is seeking HDC approval to install a radon mitigation system on the west side of the building near the street. All right. Here we have this lovely building, which is it has, I believe, 40 apartment units in it?
40, yes.
Yeah, it's great. It's a very compact building, houses a lot of people, very functional, close to downtown. You can see the 4/1 windows here. They give it a lot of character. The proposal is to put a radon mitigation unit, it looks similar to a residential radon mitigation unit, to vent this apartment down here in the corner. The trouble is, there are 3 floors of apartments above it, so it wouldn't really be very practical to cut through 3 floors and create new openings through all 3, which probably wouldn't meet the fire code, and vent it out of the roof. But since there is identified radon in the unit, they got to get it out of there. So we're looking at this area of the building right here. I'll get to more in a moment. This building, right here between the fence and the stone wall, is about 8.5 feet wide, measured by my 1-foot-long feet. It's a very, very narrow driveway. Here we are farther back, looking toward the street. And this is the back. There are 8 or 10 parking places back here, so people do use this driveway. Obviously, you wouldn't want to bring a giant U-Haul or something back here, but they do use it to access this parking in the back. So, unfortunately, this is the extent of the schematic drawing that we have right now, showing where a radon unit might vent out of the building and go up. But again, it looks the same as residential installations that we've seen around many times. It does protrude from the building quite a bit. When I ran this through the building department, they said that they're going to need some pretty specific information on what's going on here from the contractor. And they also have concerns about, as I know the owner does, about people driving by and knocking this whole ventilation system off of the building. And the fan would be approximately here on this drawing. Wondering if that doesn't need to go up higher, if it's even possible. I don't know how long a run you can have below that fan and still have it be effective. At the review committee, the commissioners can speak more about this, but we did talk a little bit about whether it would be better to snug such a system up to this seam right here between the more decorative red brick and the face brick that's in the back, the more utilitarian brick. Because there is a little bit of a lip here, and this change sort of calls attention to itself, and it might stand a little bit better chance of being both less conspicuous and less hit-able. Provided a couple of drawings of similar installations. Very important to note that these U-brackets must be installed in mortar joints. There are lots of things installed in this building right now that are through the masonry units, through the bricks, and that is not appropriate and not good for the building. So you might consider adding that to the motion. And let's see, let me go back here to Secretary of the Interior's standards 2, 9, and 10. I've already read all of them to you. But the guidelines for mechanical systems recommend installing a completely new mechanical system if required for the new use, so that it causes the least alteration possible to the building's floor plan, the exterior elevations, and the least damage to the historic building material. For a building site, not recommended is introducing new construction onto the building site which is visually incompatible in terms of size, scale, design, materials, color, and texture, or which destroys historic relationships on the site. From the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for Mechanical Equipment, it's appropriate to install mechanical equipment and wiring in locations on the roof, rear elevation, or in alleys, so they are not visible from the street. Also installing vertical runs of ducts, pipes, and cables in the interior of the building in closets, service rooms, or wall cavities, they're not visible, and painting mechanical equipment to blend with the historic building. I neglected to suggest that, no, I did. I did suggest a condition that the unit is painted to match the brick color. And also that it's not located farther north, closer to East William, than the seam where the decorative brick and the common brick meet. So with those conditions, staff does believe that the work is necessary and these conditions will mitigate its appearance as much as possible, though I do want to tell you that this will be reviewed by me again once the applicant, once the contractor comes in with more detailed drawings. And the building department also is going to have some concerns about how far it's going to protrude into the driveway. So this is not the end of this application. If you are not comfortable with what you see here today, we could also ask for that information up front from the contractor. But I'm suggesting that you look at it at least and consider whether or not this is an appropriate location for such a unit. Thank you.
All right, review committee reports, anything to add?
Not much to add. I mean, we did notice other instances, as Jill noted, of previous work that may not be up to our standards. So I'd be concerned that whatever is approved, that there's attention when the work is being done.
And so to kind of expand on that, so this photo doesn't show it, but to the commissioners sitting here, oh, there it is. There's a giant horizontal conduit that's been recently added with a lot of cabling inside, and it sticks out a lot more. It's, some of it's attached kind of wherever it needs to be attached, but it wraps all the way around the building and goes all the way in the back. And then there's some large units. Can you point your mouse on the other side of that? I guess where that light pole is. You see that little light pole? Yeah. So on that side, when you look at that wall, there's some giant units that were added for the cable, the new cable networks. There's huge frays of cable in that area, and trying to collect them and use them, and you know, it's trying to provide cable for 40 units. So there's a lot of cable. I guess the concern is that, you know, some of this, we never really saw it, wasn't applied for, or may not need to be, but nonetheless, it certainly changed the view down that alley, and how and when cable will be accessible by cars driving by. This really highlighted the fact that those were being hit. Can you go to the view at the kind of beginning? Yeah, you could see that the ones that were existing in there, that you know, cars have gotten close enough that they've rubbed them a little bit and kind of shifted them, which certainly creates a danger point and damaging, certainly damaging the conduit, but potentially damaging the anchor points that might be in brick or in mortar and tearing that out. So that's what we saw.
I have one other thing.
Mhm.
And the review committee also noted that, if you'll recall, there was a window application, and the window work is done, but most of the new windows that were installed do not have sills. That's probably a building code issue. People other than I will be following up on that. But they're just bricks laid with no sills on those basement windows that are going to be a catch point for
Yeah, it was an
water
exposed
running
brick.
down.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the window had a sill, but the wood would stop, and then the brick would continue, and it was just exposed cut
Yeah.
brick.
Yeah. So that's a side issue, though, that I may or may not bring back to you, but, okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, so that's the review committee. Would the applicant please come forward, state your name for the record, and sign in? If you have anything to add to the staff report or review committee report, please do so.
The address, do you want the address of the building or my address?
Good question.
Your address.
My address, okay. Project name. Call it, project name, I don't know that there is one, so I'll call it right on. No. My name, first of all, my name is Jeffrey Gallatin. I'm the building is actually owned by Gallatin Manor LLC and LLC. I own 100% of the LLC. I've owned the building for approximately 40 years, so I have a pretty good history of the building, and I'm the third owner of the building. But from everything I know and all the research I did. But what I'd rather start out, normally I would go off the top of my head. In this case, I'd like to read my notes and then make a few comments because I'd like to address some of the points that were brought up by your review. So first of all, I'd like to say good evening to the chairperson and fellow members of the Historical Commission. I'm not going to repeat, which sometimes I do, I'm not going to repeat what I put in my application or what Jill said, because that would just bore you, and there's no reason for it. The only thing I wanted to add is, one, that I'm sorry you had to come here for your help, and I really mean that. But it's required, so I have to. But this is not about cash flow or making money. What this is about is the health, safety, and general welfare of the tenants in the building. And so where somebody might argue with me about, well, you're doing it for money, you're a landlord, you don't care about people, and I know I'm in a democratic city, basically, and there's no secret about that at all, so it goes even harder against landlords. But this isn't about a landlord, this isn't about money, this is about health. Personally, I don't agree with radon, and I really mean that I don't agree with radon. I've done a fair amount of research on it, but everybody says, and the laws and everything say that radon can cause cancer, so if that's the case, I need to take care of the health, safety, and welfare of my tenants. So that's why I'm here. But at the same time, I think that if we work together, we ought to be able to achieve what the Historical Commission wants and what I need to do for my tenants' health, safety, and welfare. Another comment I'd like to make is, I think you're lucky to have somebody like Jill as an advisory, and I really mean that. I've appeared in front of many, many historical commissions throughout the state and throughout many states, and I've been a guest lecturer in many places about it. And I think you're just lucky to have somebody who cares about not only the health and happiness or health of people, but also property rights, and I think that's really important. So that's really, I guess I just want to emphasize the point is that there's a choice between the looks of a building and the health of a person. To me, there is none. There is absolutely none. It's the health of a person. That is the most important thing, and that's, I think, the main thing. You have to make that decision yourself, whether the health of somebody is more important than the building, the looks of the building. But I'd make a few comments. One comment is you had about the driveway. First of all, if you look at the lines that John Beeson, if I'm saying it right, mentioned, when I originally had the building wired for cable, I have a thing about liking buildings to look neat, look clean, look nice, not look sloppy. And so when cable came in, they slapped them all over everywhere they wanted to put them. I made them rip every single cable off the building, and I got into a fight with them, so I cut every single cable on the building, and nobody had cable. And then I got into a big fight with the cable company, Comcast Cable, and it ended up that we finally agreed that we could put them on, but I wanted them all in those I don't know what you really call them, they're all plastic channels, because I think it looks neat. The alternative is if I take those off, you're going to have them slopped all over the building. And to this day, every time cable comes out and needs to make an adjustment, they slap their cables around. And then I have to call them up, make them come out and change them, because if they don't, I'll cut them, period. Because I don't want them that way. It's a personal thing to make the building look nice. I can make those disappear by painting them, and I intend to paint them the same color as the brick, or stain and or paint them the same color as the brick, and then they'll pretty much go away. That's why I selected that particular type to be installed. As for the driveway, would cars hit that? I would only tell you, in the 40 years that I've owned that building, we have a few poor drivers that will scrape against the building, and we have a few poor drivers that will once in a while hit, but they have never really damaged those plastic runners on the building, I can tell you that. From what I understand from the contractor I hired to do the radon mitigation, that we are not going to be bringing it out any further than anything is already protruding. And if it's going to be bigger, it'll be above cars. So I don't have to worry about cars, because it was a concern I had myself. But on the same hand, if it's a concern about a car hitting it and a person's safety and health, as far as I'm concerned, I'll keep repairing it. But I want people that live in that building to know that they're not going to get cancer because of radon. Other than that, I think that was, the windows, the base windows, I would tell you, I think Joe's comment is good. I pulled a building permit to do the job because I'm a licensed residential commercial builder, And I had all the permits approved and everything else. So everything is done to code for all the construction. I had to come here, I don't know, I forgot how long ago it was, but I came here to get approval to do it. I got approval, and I pulled the permit, and I got the city came out, they inspected it, and they approved it. The only thing that needs to be done is I need to paint, and I just haven't had the time. I've been doing more things on the building to make it a safer, cleaner, and better place. And I'm hoping that this spring, summer, I'll be able to paint the building in the sense of paint the trim, finish scraping, patching, painting the trim, paint all the little cable holders, and anything else on the building, including the sills and things like that. Sorry for taking over 3 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. Do any commissioners have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Epperson.
What is the ceiling height in relation to the window within that unit? Like, do you know approximately?
You'll have to come up to the speaker. Come up, back up to the mic.
The ceiling height, I can honestly tell you, I don't know the exact height, but I think it's 9 feet, if my memory, it's either 8 or 9 feet.
So in relation to, like, on this image, roughly how far above that window on that unit? Is it like 3 bricks or?
It would come out if you, a little higher where that arrow is. If you come up a little higher, because what we're going to do is we're going to bring it up against the wall inside and goes right up to the ceiling and then bring it out. So we're going to go to the top limit and bring it out, which will put it above cars and also above anybody trying to screw around with it.
Okay.
So the pipes themselves are 6-inch PVC,
Yes, there's 6 inches.
and then they're stood off the wall just a little bit as well?
Well,
Just because the fan unit is about 10 inches in diameter?
I think the fan unit is either 8 to 10 inches, but that will be well above, just
Yeah.
to make sure.
So even with the fan unit above, clearly we want it as close to the building, and you do too.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Um,
I don't
so-
want it there in the first place. I
Yeah.
can be honest with you. I mean, there's no
But,
question.
it's certainly a necessary thing to put in, and with it kind of popping out the wall, if the contractor can make the turn at the 6-inch angle, do it right up against the wall at that point, and then when it comes to the fan, they can move it back out a little bit to the fan, and then move it back in again.
Yeah,
It takes a little more work on their part to do that, but, in terms of, we have our guidelines that we try and adhere to make sure that the building certainly hits the health, safety, and welfare of the occupants, but at the same time, our guidelines are trying to just help preserve the building and preserve the neighborhood. So this is one of those add-ons to a building that we're like, okay, well, we got to put this in, how do we minimize its effect? So, and I'm sure you're after that minimizing its effect as well, so.
I would comment, if you'll let me, and I won't be wordy, but I would comment that I don't want it there in the first place. I tried to figure out how we could do it. I couldn't go through the floors because it'll destroy the integrity. So I have the building, and bigger chance if there was a fire, the whole building could get destroyed. Then I thought what I'd try to do was route it so it could go from where it is there, go inward, and then go across a hallway and through above some fire doors, out into the alley.
And
The
that's-
problem is if you do that, you lose the effect of the radon, so you can't do that. Then I tried to figure what other option, there's just no,
Yeah, there
I
is. Is it
checked, I
just that
called a
one
number
unit?
of architects, I called a number of other people in other cities that install radon, and there's just nothing, they just don't make anything that you can do. There's nothing that's that flat or that narrow. But what I can tell you is that the way it'll be done is it'll be done as tight as I can to the wall on the inside of the apartment, and then when it comes out, it'll be as tight as it can possibly be all the way up. Now, you may not want to believe me, and I wouldn't disagree with that, but if you look at even if you look in the picture, if you look at the first set of windows going south, you can see where I have the little cable, the plastic cable things. And I've made them as tight and as narrow and as inconspicuous as I possibly can, because I just don't want to, I just don't want to crap up the building, is what I don't want to do. I mean, that's all there is to it. So I can't assure you, but I can tell you that I will do everything in my power. I'll comply with whatever you say, and I'll comply with whatever the building department says, but I will still bend it to keep it as tight as I can possibly keep it against the building. And if they ever make anything that shrinks it, I'll replace it.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant?
I'd like to hear the answer to the question you were trying to add. Is it only this unit?
Yes, it's a good question. And let me back up and tell you that I didn't even know I had radon, and I really mean that. But what I did is I decided to refinance the building. And when I refinanced the building, they did an environmental inspection, and it didn't show anything. But then I decided to improve on that. When I did, it came up that there are, I have to think for a second, I apologize, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units in the lower level. And it came up that there were 5 of the 7 have radon. And so, but we don't have a problem because of the way we can route them out. They aren't visible from the street, they'll be in the alcove and things like that. So it's not a historical commission problem. But we have 1 unit, and that's unit 96, that there's just no way we could do anything else with. And
So there are, did I hear that correctly then? There's 5 total units that have a radon issue.
That's correct.
One of which is this application, but there are 4 other units that will have separate individual radon units
That's correct.
installed.
If I might interrupt you just for a second, but politely. And I,
Staff approval.
Yeah,
We're,
so
we're,
the-
we're double checking on something.
Yes.
Oh.
The other units that are in the back of the building will require an HDC application, but that'll be for staff approval, not for commission approval.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's unit 94, 96, 97, 98, and 99.
Okay.
Those are all the units that have it. And so I went ahead, but we figured all that out, so it wouldn't be a problem. So we wouldn't need historical approval, but we still have to pull a building permit and get building
Okay.
approval, and we will do that.
All right. Any other discussion or questions for the application?
I mean, you will need historic approval. It just will be staff
Staff,
approval, not,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Not a-
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Just-
Yeah.
Yeah.
I meant that we don't need historical commission approval. I don't need historical commission
Commission,
approval. I need
okay.
staff approval,
Staff approval.
and then building department approval.
Yes.
Right.
And I think that Jill, if I might end, I think Jill has talked to the person that I wanted to, they communicated up and back, who's going to do the work, and she said she didn't have a problem with what he wanted, I think. I'm not trying to put words in her mouth.
Yeah, I
Didn't
haven't,
really
I
have a
haven't seen any
problem.
pictures, but from his verbal description, it sounded okay, because
Yeah,
you have to realize that the building is U-shaped, and there's a
Yeah.
very narrow corridor
Right.
in the back, and it's a good place to hide stuff like this. Yeah, yeah.
and I'll do everything I can. I could just say again, on those other units, even though that's not in front of the commissioner, I'll do everything I can to keep them, again, flat, away, and not visible. So.
All right. Moving on to the public hearing, are there members of the public who would like to speak on this agenda item? All right, I will now close the public hearing portion of the application, and the applicant would please be seated. Thank you. And would any commissioner like to make a motion on this application?
Commissioners, before somebody makes a motion, I would like to suggest that the suggested motion add, and that all fasteners will be mounted through mortar joints, not masonry units. You'll see where.
I'm guessing Commissioner Rockland's moving to, or Commissioner Hall.
Want to read that? Gonna make more?
Do I want to make the motion? I can make the motion. I have it right in front, she wrote
Oh,
it in, so I can.
wonderful.
Good, go.
If you agree with it, if you agree with it.
If I agree with it, let me see. Yes, I do agree with it. I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 332 East William Street, a contributing structure in East William Historic District, to install a radon mitigation unit on the west side of the building with the following conditions: that the entire radon unit is painted to match the brick color, and that it is not located farther north than the seam where the decorative brick and comet brick meet, and that all fasteners will be mounted through mortar joints, not masonry units. As conditioned, the work is compatible in exterior design arrangement, materials, and relationship to the building and the surrounding area, and meets the city of of Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for Mechanical Equipment, and the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, in particular standards 2, 9, and 10, and the guidelines for mechanical systems.
Support.
Seconded by Commissioner White. Is there a discussion on the motion? Commissioner Rockland.
Question for the review committee. I haven't seen it in a photo, and I assume not, but when the stack is going up, can it just go straight up, or are there windows or something in the way, or?
My memory is that it can go straight.
It's
Yeah.
a straight line.
Yeah.
Look at the picture.
Well, the
Straight line.
Yeah,
the
there
picture
was-
goes off this, I don't see the
I
end.
don't-
Yeah, there's no cornice.
Okay.
Yeah, there's nothing at that.
Yeah, it's a
roof
straight
side.
shot. It's got those
That's what
clay
I was
tile
assuming, but just wanted to
copings.
make sure.
Just go straight up.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions, discussions? All right, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, please say no. All right, the motion carries. Your application has been approved, and you will receive written notification from staff. Please note that you must apply for any required permits from the city before beginning your project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd just like to say thank you again. You've helped me before, and you've helped me again. But I can assure you, to answer your question, even though I'm wasting your time, it does go straight up.
Yeah.
And then it'll go above the roof, and there'll be a little cap on it.
Yeah.
So, but I will do my best to make it disappear.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right, on to F4, 346 East Kingsley.
This two-story Craftsman is in the Old Fourth Ward Historic District. Features a brown brick first floor and shingled second floor with exposed rafter tails and decorative barge boards in the gables. The house has 2 brick column stoops and a full-width brick porch facing North Division Street, and a matching single-car garage off of East Kingsley. House appears in the 1916 Sanborn Fire Insurance map. The lot was previously vacant. It first appears in city directories in 1917 as the home of William and Emma Siegert. Mr. Siegert, whose photo is on the staff report, owned a saloon at 122 West Liberty. Mr. Siegert's descendants still own a large beer distributorship serving 7 counties in southeastern Michigan, and a saloon has operated continuously at 122 West Liberty for 121 years. It's currently the Old Town Tavern. So the previous owner, not this one, removed historic wood windows and installed vinyl ones without permits or a certificate of appropriateness. Enforcement's been ongoing. The new owner has been great working with staff to find appropriate replacement windows to put new, almost replica wood windows in where the wood ones were removed. Site on the south side of East Kingsley Street at the southwest corner of North Division, and the applicant is seeking HTC approval to install one 22.5 by 37.5 inch skylight on the front half of the south-facing roof. This is a really neat house. I've had a chance to go in it a couple times, unfortunately doing enforcement over the years, but it's a sort of a quintessential Craftsman, and it has a lot of detailing that's very cool. The brick porch faces Division. It's interesting that they took advantage of that on this corner lot to put the entry off of Kingsley instead of off of Division. And the area in question that they'd like to install a skylight is up here on this roof surface. It's a little bit closer to the ridge than it is to the eave. There are 2 bedrooms up in this 3rd floor attic. They've always been used as bedrooms. But in order to get more light and ventilation in there, I've already given the owner a staff approval to put a skylight behind the shed dormer that you see here, completely out of sight from the street. So that one could be approved by staff, but the one farther forward needed to have commission review. This really is a quite a unique house in the Old Fourth Ward. These first floor windows are the ones that were replaced, that need to be replaced with wood windows. The upper floor windows were already vinyl, and they were replaced with vinyl. So the approximate location to install the skylight, the perspective's a little bit skewed, but you can get the idea of where it's going. It's not a particularly large skylight as they go. It is a low profile. It's dark, which I always appreciate. The dark ones look better up there than the aluminum ones because they don't show up as easily. Applicant provided some other comparables around. This one is the most important. This is the house right next door. This is the house that we're talking about. And the house next door has one in approximately the same location, a little bit higher on the ridge, but it also is pretty unobtrusive. And in order to make those bedrooms more usable, I think it is appropriate to install a skylight here on the front of this house. So the Secretary of Interior standards, 2, 9, and 10, I've already read all of those to you. From the guidelines for roofs, it's recommended to identify, retain, and preserve roofs and their functional and decorative features that are important in defining the overall historic character of the building. I don't believe that this work would obscure or otherwise compromise any functional or decorative features. It's not recommended to change the configuration of a roof by adding new features such as dormer windows, vents, or skylights. That historic character is diminished. Again, that's the key. I don't believe any historic character of the house would be impacted by this, even though it's visible from the street. From the guidelines for alterations for the new use, recommended is designing additions to roofs such as skylights when required by the new use that they are inconspicuous from the public right-of-way and do not damage or obscure character-defining structures. So staff does believe that this application meets the guidelines and standards in the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines, and is in favor of it. Thank you.
All right. Review committee, would you have anything to say, Commissioner Keating?
Not much to add, it's just that it is a corner lot, so those can be tricky, but I don't know which photo best shows it, but that's, in my mind, that's kind of it's a secondary facade, tucked in very closely to the adjacent building, which happens to have a corresponding skylight, almost matching, so, I don't see much else
Yeah.
to add.
All right, I don't have anything to add either. Would the applicant please come forward and state your name for the record and sign in? And if you have anything to add to the staff report or the review committee report, feel free.
My name is Egan Katimek. I will live at 346 East Kingsley. Everything has mostly been said. The main thing with that bedroom right there is the two small windows don't carry enough light, so the ventilation is definitely a crucial key in a house with no air conditioning, and also really helps with like studying in that room, especially where I will be most of the time. So yeah, thank you very much for pointing that out, that the house opposite also has a very similar skylight, and it isn't too visible from the street as well.
All right, any questions for the application? All right, moving on to the public hearing. Any members of the public who would like to speak on this agenda? Nope. Yes, nope. All right. I'll now close the public hearing portion of the application, and you may please be seated. Thank you. And then any commissioners like to make a motion on this application? Commissioner Hall.
I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 346 East Kingsley Street, a contributing property in the old Fourth Ward Historic District, to install a skylight on the south-facing roof as proposed. The work is compatible in exterior design, arrangement, texture, material, and relationship to the rest of the building and the surrounding area, and meets the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, in particular standards 2, 9, 10, and the guidelines for roofs, windows, and building site, as well as the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines, particularly as they pertain to windows.
Support.
Seconded by Commissioner White. Is there any further discussion? Did you have one? Commissioner
I
Rothman?
mean, I just want to say that it can be difficult controlling light in a skylight if it's in a bedroom. It sounds like it's in a bedroom. I would just say that it meets the standards as far as I know, but since we have the owner here, just, you know, if you might want to get window shades. It doesn't say that they're being installed, but I would say window shades would be a good recommendation.
You're saying because of at night or in the morning? Right.
Well,
City lights?
a skylight is
Street
difficult
light.
to control
It is.
light
It's-
coming
it's
through,
different
so,
than
especially on the south-facing side. So I think it meets the standards, and
Yep.
Ready to vote.
Is there further discussion? All right, ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, please say no. All right, the motion carries. Your application has been approved, and you will receive written notification from staff. Please note that you must apply for any required permits from the city before beginning your project. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, on to F5, 421 West Jefferson.
Back to the Old West Side Historic District. This two-story gable fronter features eave returns, a full-width front porch with a hipped roof, a bay window on the east facade, cut stone foundation, and a one-story rear wing with a one-story addition on the back. It appears on the 1869 City of Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County map, and the first city directory listing is in 1872 as the home of carpenter C. Schonborl, with his residence at 31 West Jefferson. The footprint of the house on the 1899 Sanborn map is essentially the same as it is today, only the section of the porch that we'll be talking about today on the east elevation is missing. Aluminum siding was removed from the house in the first half of 2006, and in June 2006, an application was approved for a sunroom addition, roughly in the same location as the current application, but it was never constructed. Property is on the southeast corner of West Jefferson and 3rd Streets, and the applicant is seeking HDC approval to construct a single-story, 370-square-foot addition on a crawl space. This is a lovely quintessential Old West Side home. It comes with beautiful children who greeted us warmly at our site visit. So West Jefferson is over here on the left, and 3rd Street is on the right, thank you. You can see that it's a two-story block, then it has a one-story wing, let's walk around the house, and then it has a one-story side gable wing that really resembles a building that was added onto the back of the house at some point. The foundation doesn't match the foundation. Maybe wood, a previous applicant said that in their paperwork. Well, most of the rest of the house has a stone foundation, but it's a very cool conglomeration of buildings. Here's the little building in the back. Now we're still going around the house. You can see that this is much narrower, this rear wing, than the main two-story block of the house. And now this is the area that we'll be talking about today where they would like to put an addition. Did I? Thank you, Commissioner Rockland, for excusing yourself. I didn't even notice that. We did have one conflict of interest, a commissioner who had to leave the room. You can see that there's a very beautiful bay window here on the main house block. And this porch appears on Sanborn maps, disappears on Sanborn maps, reappears on Sanborn maps. At one point, part or all of this wall was inset farther, and it was an inset porch, maybe to this corner here, I'm not sure, but at some point, this window and wall were added. You can see that there's a seam here. I don't know why that seam was there. There's that seam again. You can see that the porch roof changes by a couple of inches. Lots of mysteries on this little porch. Some of these columns look very old, these very tapered ones with the more decorative moldings than others. But then you see that some of these against the house are just plain flat boards. And then the two down here are sort of like these chamfered ones, but a junior version that aren't as decorative. And yeah, just there's nothing really consistent anywhere on this porch. It's very cute and it's very functional, but it seems to have been added in pieces over time. Now we're looking back from the bay window toward the addition. And this is a very large pear tree, and one of the goals of this project was to bump out the porch area with an addition, but to not impact the pear tree, which is much appreciated, and to maintain this lovely side yard. The new addition would not project past the wall of the bay window for perspective. Oh, I'm sorry, it looks like the proposed drawings are not in the PowerPoint, so we're going to have to refer to the staff report for that. Let me run through the Secretary of Interior's guidelines. Number 2, 9, and 10 have already been read to you. The guidelines for additions recommend constructing a new addition so that there's the least possible loss of historic materials, and so that character-defining features are not obscured, damaged, or destroyed, and designing new additions in a manner that makes clear what is historic and what is new. For additions, it's also recommended to design new additions in a manner that makes clear what is historic and what is new, considering the attached exterior addition both in terms of the new use and the appearance of other buildings in the historic district or neighborhood. Design for the new work may be contemporary or may reference design motifs from the historic building. Not recommended is introducing new construction that's visually incompatible. And also not recommended is removing or radically changing buildings and their features which are important in defining the overall historic character of the building site, so that as a result, the character is diminished. From the guidelines for windows, it's not recommended to introduce a new design that's incompatible with the historic character of the building. And from the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines, limiting the size and scale of the addition in relationship to the historic building so that it does not diminish or visually overpower the building or the district. The addition's footprint should not exceed 1/2 of the original building's footprint or 1/2 of the original building's total floor area. All right, so first I'm going to run through some staff report bits, and then I'm going to, if you'd like, I can try to pull up those drawings a different way on your computers, because this is a difficult application, and I did not describe it well because it's a very visual kind of application. So maybe in a second, you can start doing something else, and I'll try to get those up. But just some basics here. The footprint is proposed to increase 370 square feet, which is not 3%, it's, I think, 30%, from 1,094 to 1,467 square feet. Actually, that's closer to 40%. The floor area increases 23% from 1,596 to 1,966. This does meet the design guideline that says the addition should exceed neither half of the building's footprint or the original building's total floor area. The addition is proposed to be clad in fiber cement lap siding to match the exposure of the existing wood siding. Proposed windows are clad wood, and a new fiberglass door with 2 panels and a quarter-height window on top is proposed. The soffit is stained wood. One note is that the design guidelines state that previously painted wood trim and soffit should remain painted, but a clear sealant would be appropriate since this is a modern addition. All right. If you don't mind, could you move on to the public hearing while I pull up the drawings, and then,
Sure. As in applicant coming forward and the
yeah,
public hearing?
yeah, and I'll circle back around.
Well, do you want to
and
do
go over the
review
drawings.
committee as well?
Yeah, you can do review committee. That'd be a
Alright,
great
so
thing
let's
to
start
do.
with review committee.
Okay.
Commissioner Keanu, do you want to add anything?
Let's see.
You looked at surrounding buildings?
Yeah, we looked at surrounding buildings, there are various additions on adjacent or nearby properties, so that would not be out of character. Also spent some time walking around the existing porch area and how that attaches to the different additions, one-story parts of the home. Looking at all the clues that's morphed over time, and the variety of details there. So trying to pin down what's original. I think as proposed, the design is showing, retaining the character defining features of what's there. We did talk about the pear tree, and that the applicants are doing everything they can to save that tree, speaking with an arborist. And, yeah, not much more.
Yeah. I guess the only aspects that I would add is, and this will be part of the discussion, is how much of the existing porch, can you go to the image of that porch? Yeah, so how much of this porch is, 1, character defining, 2, does it fit within the period of significance? And then 3, if it's removed, is it okay to be removed? Because we would be removing what we could consider historic materials. So that I'll save for the discussion part. So in terms of what we observed on site, yeah, those columns are definitely not the definitely scabbed from somewhere else. They look almost like, the middle ones are especially Victorian in nature. They have a lot of Victorian details. Whereas the ones on either end are a little more plain Jane. And then there is definitely a lot going on in terms of like the stoop and the little porch in the area and how they tried to tie it all together. So there was, someone was imaginative at the time to try and create some porch space. So it's kind of hard to decipher, what was intended here, was anything intended in the first place, and is it historically significant or character defining? Yeah, so that's what I'll say about that. Moving on to the public hearing, we'll go with the applicant. Is the applicant here? Would you like to state your name for the record and sign in? And if you have anything to add to the staff report or the review committee reports, please do so.
I'm Quinn Strassel,
Adrienne Pizzoni.
and I don't think there's much to add. I think there was a 1947 aerial photo where there was no roof there, so there was clearly no porch at that time, so whatever is there seems to be something that was added afterwards. That's
Yep.
one thing I would add.
Just put that. Or I guess I should say. Okay.
Any questions for the applicant? Unless you guys have some things to say about the staff report before that? No? Any questions? What year did you guys acquire the house?
2009.
Okay. Any questions? We're still waiting for drawings to look at some of the drawings, but we can help elaborate on some of that in terms of what was new and what's addition. Potentially, like looking at this, here, let's see if I can scroll through. Yeah, here. So the addition, based on the drawings, would come, is our understanding of it.
Yes.
It's in this line, and the footprint would extend beyond this corner. It would come out to about here-ish, and then wrap around this way and wrap back into the house, where a portion of the house, this portion of the house, would be covered by the new addition. Is that right?
That's right. And there's a seam right in that wall
Yeah.
that
Right
sort of
here somewhere.
indicates
And
where
then-
clearly some work has been done.
And then there's some drawings that are trying to demonstrate the new roofing, because the roofing's not going to be pretty straightforward, especially when you're going up against this gable here. So the roof was also something that we tried to look at on the drawings, and you might want to provide some additional technical eye on. What do you got? There was the fiber cement siding issue to help differentiate from the old wood-clad windows. Any other details in the drawings that we should?
The window that we see at the porch
Oh, she's bringing
is not original.
Oh, yeah, the
It's
window at
like
the porch.
It's an aluminum.
Which one is it?
Right,
On-
yeah,
actually
the one
in the
that's
porch?
facing
Yeah,
out
behind the
toward the,
columns.
right, facing the porch, yeah.
This one.
Yeah,
that.
okay.
And then the door that you also see off of the porch is not an original door either.
Go to zoom, view zoom, or you can hit that. I would go to view zoom and then do a full page.
Full page option.
Yeah, it should be under the
View.
view, but now it's doing something else. It has to think,
It's processing.
it's still thinking. Slowly. Pretty soon we're gonna hear the dial-up tone for AOL.
Right.
I'm just thinking of gerbils running on wheels.
There, down there, down.
No,
Full screen
go
mode,
down.
control
Full
L.
screen mode.
There.
Yay. Okay. No, don't make me do this. Okay.
That's the aerial you were referring to?
Yeah,
Mhm.
is that the 1947?
Yeah.
Lovely photographs.
There we go.
Yeah, this is great. This is really helpful to show basically the line of new construction that's being proposed.
There's
This
the
is a
seam.
seam, yep, where the porch is inset. That blow-up is very helpful. the modern window and door to be removed. Here we go. Proposed addition from the northeast, from the southeast. It has what's becoming this architect's signature feature. The shed roof popped-up dormer, the wall of windows, the panels below. But the interesting thing about it, I think, is how the roof line is handled. Rather than just having back here a big offset gable, this gable was pulled in to make a little tiny gable back here that's much more compatible with the little room on the back, and then go to a shed and then pop up to that shed dormer a little ways back. The goal being so that you're standing here on the sidewalk, it looks like the top rendering, not like, not something less compatible. This is all existing second floor plan. Existing. Okay, there's the footprint of the one-story addition. It's on a crawl. And there's the interesting roof lines. Here's that little ridge on the gable, and here's the low sloping, I guess it's almost a hip here, isn't it? And then we have the popped up section. And then we revert back to this sloped, that maintains a ridge. Yeah, you gotta see it, that's. Note that the window proportions are pretty carefully considered, especially when you're looking from, this is a slow one. Yeah, when you're looking from the street, I'll go back up to those other renderings in a minute. The windows are handled very well. The proportions are very compatible with the existing house, while not matching them exactly.
So if this were flipped, well, can you go back?
Yep.
So if this were flipped, and we can look at it differently. So the existing gable, well, we're not in the discussion phase.
Yeah, don't discuss.
Let me finish that.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant?
No questions.
All right, moving on to the public hearing. Are there members of the public who would like to speak on this item? You guys, anything else to say?
No.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
I'll now close the public hearing portion, and you may please be seated. Thank you. Would any commissioners like to make a motion on the application?
I'll go.
Commissioner Hall.
I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 421 West Jefferson Street, a contributing property in the Old West Side Historic District, to construct a single-story, 370-square-foot addition on crawl space. The work as proposed is compatible in exterior design, arrangement, materials, and relationship to the house and to the surrounding area. It meets the City of Ann Arbor Historic District design guidelines for all additions and the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings. In particular, standards 2, 9, and 10, and the guidelines for new additions, district, or neighborhood setting, building, site, and windows.
Support.
Seconded by Commissioner White. Is there discussion on the motion? Well, I have discussion points. Does anyone else want to go?
Oh, go ahead.
All right. So again, I brought up in the review committee discussions about, well, is this a contributing structure to the original porch? You know, and it being kind of hobbled together and pieced together, I don't think it gives us a full perspective of the whole house. I think the whole house is what provides the historic nature of the house. That all these little additions on the back are cute and quaint, and how they're tied together makes them more unique than the like the whole structure is what's unique to me. So like if we, like the first photo that we looked at, and it showed that kind of traditional home in the front. That, to me, is like what speaks is its historic nature. It's a character-defining feature, and all the little add-ons in the back are still cute and quaint and kind of contribute to it, but they're not the sole defining feature to it. So the back porch, particularly since it's not visible, is an area to me that also says, all right, well, this could probably go. It may not be the primary contributing part of the house. All right, thoughts on that?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just say, I agree, the fact that, that porch has been cobbled together over the years. This is yet another iteration, an improvement, much improved use of that area, and yet still keeps in character with the collection of one-story additions on the back of the house.
Yeah, definitely. It helps with the one-story aspect. I think if it was any bigger, it would certainly be competing at that point.
Right.
I would add that, the designer kept the gable, a small portion of the gable in this view, and then if not on this view, if you go around, it's stepped down from even a small one-story already. I just think it's.
Yeah, in terms of you're
through the
saying the
scale
whole
of that.
scale
Yeah,
of it is
exactly.
down, yeah. And that bump out allows you to still have kind of a full height area within it without
Right.
creating a full height, huge area. So there's one part of this application that kind of bothers me, and I'll be blunt. So the historic gable that we see in this area that is kind of being covered over in a way, in my terminology, will be muddled by the gable that's being carried through in the opposite direction. I'm not sure why that has to be there, particularly as it, in my mind, obscures the historic gable of that small little unit in the back. All in all, I think the application looks fantastic. It works great, especially with the size and scale and relationship. It's just that one little part where that additional gable is coming through. And it creates a lot of constructability issues, if nothing else, especially how do you overlap the eaves on that part and then maintain the gable above it. So if you're trying to go to the roof plan, it also causes some problems in the roof plan. It might just be better to kind of flick that part away and let the roof be kind of a slow sloping roof in that area instead. But overarchingly, we're not here to design it, so it still meets the guidelines.
Either way, I think it
Either
meets
way.
the guidelines.
Yeah,
Yeah.
either way it meets the guidelines. I'm just saying that that's one area that I'm like, yeah, it's kind of obscuring an historic portion that shows the little gable, but all the other views and perspectives keep that. There's your roof line. Yeah, so there's that little extended gable that's coming through, that gable portion that is out of scale, out of relationship. It doesn't meet the sizes of all the other gables. It kind of, in my mind, just obscures the gable that's already there. And if it was gone, I don't think it would deter from anything. Maybe it's trying to capture the ridge so that there's a better way of putting that corner ridge. I'm going to move your mouse so you can see that part. This little part, to be able to capture that coming back into the existing roof. Maybe there's some constructability on making sure that goes somewhere. So maybe by putting that little gable, it's capturing that. But by and large, I still look at the side elevation going, I'm not sure why that gable's there. And it could be that, I could see that it's there in order to capture this rain coming on the other side of this, but, maybe this roof can come all the way to there to address it. But again, constructability issues,
Yeah.
detailing that's outside of our purview, but
Yep.
again, I still see that on that one elevation, it is obscuring a portion of the historic structure. I'm sold with, kind of getting rid of the old porch, as it's kind of a hodgepodge of things and doesn't really contribute. So now it's, okay, what are we replacing with it, and does that meet the guidelines? And by and large, I think it does. It's just that one thing about obscuring historic features. Any other further discussion? No. Okay. Ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes. Yes. All those opposed, please say no. The motion carries. Your application has been approved, and you will receive written notification from staff. Please note that you must apply for any required permits from the city before beginning on your project. Thank you. All right, F6, 613, 619
We
East
need to get
William.
Commissioner Rockland.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
get Commissioner
please.
Rockland. He's not watching it already.
Yeah. All right, oh, that's right, I got a tree and sticks here.
We have another person.
Yeah, one in, one out.
Hmm?
One in, one out.
Yeah, one
Kate, are we taking a break or?
No, I'm just switching
Switching
PowerPoints.
sessions.
Oh, Anna's stepping out for this.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, this seemed a little odd, but it's not,
Again, it still
Yeah.
works, but it's just weird. to me.
yeah.
We didn't have the designer here to.
Yeah, the Badger. It reminds me of the Duderstadt Center, where they had like, these towers with these pyramids on it, and you're like, what? Just flick them, just flick them off.
Okay. This two-story commercial block features metal siding over brick construction with a tin cornice and tin detailing. The bay at 619 was built first. This is actually a little bit wrong. The history that's in the study committee report for this historic district doesn't really line up with when you're standing there looking at the building and you're figuring out what's going on. So this bay was built first. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 windows. And the first occupant was Lewis Stevens Barber and Baths. Vertical tin siding is visible on the second floor. You can see it here between the windows, and you can see it up here in this decorative band. I'll zoom in on that in a minute. The diamonds above the window also appear to be older and more substantial than the ones on the other storefronts to the west. Yeah, yeah. In a minute, I'll show you a historic picture that was provided by the applicant. Lots of diamond stuff is going on here. There used to be one diamond over each window. Also, you'll notice that there's, on the cornice here, there's a decorative bracket sort of thing here, and then there's a pair here. This used to be the center entry of the building, which makes perfect sense. And then past the third window, this bracket used to be here, and it was moved over, which is the first time I've seen that.
Just because.
Yeah. So this 6-window bay building was built first in 1892, and then in 1899, this guy over here on the end was built. The original occupant there was shoemaker Eugene Lambert. The 3-story building to the east, the tall one at 342 South State, was built in 1905. Current occupants are, you can see, Pita Kebab and Tianchu Restaurant. So this application is to replace first-floor storefronts and as well this storefront slash door opening with a new storefront system. Everything here is non-original on the first floor currently, with the exception of this nice cornice over this one storefront and a single iron column that you can't actually see because it's currently buried in the storefront. Building is on the north side of East William Street, one building west of South State, and the applicant is seeking HDC to install new storefronts along the extent of the 2-story building. All right, so applicant provided better photos than I could get of the whole block in its current state. We can refer back to those if you need them. This is the door, not this one, that's part of this proposal. You can see here, you can see some of that tin cladding here, which is really quite unique for Ann Arbor. Some other places, like, it's all over the place on Mackinac Island for some reason, but you don't see much of that in Ann Arbor. Here, it's been obscured, hopefully not replaced, but I don't know, with something else. And here you can see that it still exists above the Pita Kebab. This is obviously the most, has the most historic material remaining on it as a storefront. This storefront was approved by the HTC, I think about 20 years ago. It looked really nice on paper. It's a little bit shop worn now. Those plans called for a possible restoration of the transom. Obviously, that didn't happen. Here's the door that's proposed to be removed, nothing historic within this opening, and a new unit within those same opening. So these are cool pictures from just 1973, not that long ago. At least for some of us, it's not that long ago. Center entry, flanking doors for either of these storefronts. All of the doors have been moved around, and the interior floor plan no longer allows them to be put back where they used to be, which is very unfortunate. But this one had a very cool leaded glass window. Maybe this one did at one time too. And this one, unfortunately, the 613 at the end, there aren't any photos that I found or the applicant found that show what that might have looked like. It could have been similar to this, but it was added later. It carried this cornice detailing, but we don't really know what was going on the first floor on this building. So on the plans, first floor is demolished, storefronts, and it's brought back as 3 bays. This is the existing and will remain the main door into Tianshu. There's a floor elevation change on the interior, so there is a large substantial ramp here. This door is centered as much as it could be. I talked to the architect about that several times. They just can't slide it over to exactly line up with where the original was, but at least it's got the proportions a little better, showing these 6 windows as the first 2-bay building, and then these 4 as a different building. So it's appreciated the effort that went into making those read a little more consistently. Signage is shown on here. It's placeholder signage just to get approved for size and location, and then a future tenant would have to come in and get an actual staff approval that meets those dimensions. And I'm going to skip ahead here to the 3D renderings. There are, and we can refer back to those if we need to. There are a lot of gooseneck light lamps on the building. There are 2 on each of the signs. There's 1 on this little pedestrian scale blade sign. There's another blade sign here, but it doesn't seem to have its own light. And the design guidelines, the published design guidelines don't address gooseneck lighting, but the language that the HDC previously has come up with that will be incorporated into the design guidelines says no gooseneck lamps. The question here is whether or not this is a modern enough feature. What the commission was trying to avoid when it sought to add those to the design guidelines was to get away from things that look like barn lights, things that look ye olde, pretend old-fashioned. These are pretty sleek as goosenecks go, but they're still goosenecks. And there is a little bit more information in the application packet on those. Some close-ups here. The signs, the pedestrian scale signs do meet the design guidelines for pedestrian scale signs. They are 2.7 square feet, and I think that they're appropriately situated. It's nice that there'll be some consistency on this block with signage, both for pedestrians and for cars driving by. Storefront systems are simple, large sheets of glass. The transom is not present in this design, which, you know, I wish that it were a little bit truer to the historic, but I do think that this is a compatible design with the building. Upstairs, I'm hoping that a few diamonds are going to be moved around, and maybe that bracket will even be put back, but from the Secretary of Interior standards that best apply, number 1 says that a property will be used as it was historically or be given a new use that requires minimal change to its distinctive materials, features, spaces, and spatial relationships. This application is certainly bringing it much closer to its original character and feel than it is right now. I've read numbers 2 and 9 to you already. From the guidelines for storefronts, recommended is designing and constructing a new storefront when the historic storefront is completely missing. It may be an accurate restoration, or it may be a new design that's compatible with the size, scale, and material of the historic building. New designs should be flush with the facade and be kept as simple as possible. Oh, I didn't even, well, let me go through these first. I didn't talk about the cornice. Not recommended is introducing a new design that's incompatible in size, scale, material, and color. Also not recommended is removing or radically changing buildings and their features or site features which are important in defining the overall historic character of the building, so that as a result the character is diminished. Also not recommended is introducing a new window design that's not compatible. And from the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for Signs, it's appropriate to install signage in the historic sign band area, typically the area above the transoms or just above the storefront, and installing signage that's compatible in size, style, material, and appearance. Also placing signs to align with others along the commercial block face, and signage that's subordinate to the overall building composition. Please note that the original cornice that's on the 619 address would be carried all the way across 617, so that that is consistent with the original as well. And then on 613, it's a little bit simplified. They're not carrying that cornice over because there's not really any evidence so far that it existed exactly the same. So that attention to detail I appreciate as well. So this is there now with the little dentals and the nice molding, and it'll be extended across, but then stop because, as you see in this photo, it stops right there. And who knows if it was that way before or not. Let's see. So in some of the elevation drawings, there are 2 goosenecks on each of the 3 signs, plus one on the westernmost. The colored images are a little bit inconsistent, but these are the color images, but I am defaulting to what's shown on the elevation drawings. There are 2 streetlights, one in front of 619 right here, and one in front of 611, which is just off of the picture here. So staff does have concerns that the lights, all of these lights will be overkill. If the HDC believes that the fixtures are appropriate, the suggested motion is conditioned on limiting the lighting to 2 fixtures on each of these 3 signs and 2 fixtures on the signs at 613 and 619, the larger signs, one on this smaller entry that just says sign, and none on the 2 bracket signs. Staff does find that this is a vast improvement over the existing mishmash and is generally appropriate, meets the Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines and the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines. There are a few more photos in the staff report, historic photos, but maddeningly, none of them show 613, at least in its historic state. So, thank you.
Can you talk about the materials used in the elevations, or in the new storefronts?
That's a good idea. Why don't we have the architect comment on that rather than me looking it up right now? Okay.
Thank you.
Not just yet.
Oh,
We have the review committee reports, and then you come. Review committee reports, go ahead.
Let's see, when we were on site, we talked about, I mean, they're not original, but they're proposing to maintain the existing entry locations. Those aren't moving. So making that work with the new design.
Questions about the band at the top, that wood band that's underneath the window
Yes,
sills?
so there's, I don't know which photo, there's an existing photo, but there's the second floor windows, it appears there isn't really much of a sill to them. It's just a tall trim
oh,
board.
yeah.
Yeah, that one right there. And I can't remember, John,
There was
if
also a
that
board.
trim piece is included, well, there's gonna be a new cornice, so just below that, I think.
Yeah, and I think it was still kind of confusing, because so much of it was in disrepair. So we'd have to get clarification from the architect.
How
on
much of that is
And how much of that's going to be
staying.
fixed.
Another thing that I was trying to reconcile while we were on site, and I looked at photos afterwards, was, so that second story, the diamonds and the brackets up at the top cornice, we've acknowledged that there's been something done over whenever that was previously, but the drawings indicate existing to remain, but the drawings show a more regular pattern to them, more true to the historic photos. So I'm not clear if that's something that's been applied for previously or in other discussions, but these drawings, the proposed drawings show the diamonds and the top cornice brackets in their historic locations in a much regular pattern. But when I was looking at existing photographs,
Go down to the
it's kind
next
of a
page, Jill.
mishmash.
That's the zoomed in one. Yeah, there. Some of them are dark.
Indicating.
Does that mean new or moved?
Right.
So questions for the architect?
Yeah.
So some clarification would be helpful.
All right. Other observations? Yeah. Okay.
Vast improvement.
Vast improvement. Let's see. All right, would the applicant please come forward, state your name for the record, and sign in? And then if you have anything to staff, add to the staff report or the review committee discussions, that would be great.
Thank you. Rob Burrows, representing the project team with OX Studio Architects. Jill did, as usual, wonderful job with an exposition of what the overall intent of the project is. It's actually, there's a broader project that is part of this entire exercise. The current property owner purchased the building in 2014. Really not much has taken place since the purchase and acquisition of that. We were contracted with the owner in late 2015 and 2016. We created a laser scan set of existing condition documentation, both interior and exterior, and have been slowly and iteratively working with our client to get a clear path of understanding in terms of what is historic, what can they do, what do they want to do. Ultimately, the game plan is to, as you can see with the renderings, is to really breathe some new life into these multiple buildings, all the way up and down the street, turning the corner onto State. So a lot of the elements, the questions you're identifying are technically not part of our presentation this evening, but that's the other part of the efforts that are directly underway right now. They're procuring bids with, including working with groups like Detroit Cornice right now to actually begin masonry and cornice restoration work. So when you're looking at that upper area, we see the stars, little medallions being relocated and highlighted. It is our intent to relocate those, ideally. I mean, it's certainly our preference as architects and historic architects on top of it all to make this building look as original as it possibly can, where we have original material still intact. So the medallions, it is really vital. Our only concern is we haven't literally peeled this off. I'm not sure how they were moved in the first place, to be totally frank. So we want to find a way to remove them. Fortunately, we're working with a phenomenal group with Detroit Cornice that should give us some opportunities to relocate the materials, as well as restore, rehabilitate, and obviously preserve into the future all of the existing cornice systems, all the metal systems on the exterior facade. As part of that bigger push too, beyond what we're in front of you this evening, there'll be a full masonry restoration exercise, kind of a binding or blending together of the buildings into a composite aesthetic with a fresh paint job, essentially, highlighting the original historic materiality in the upper levels in particular, and then blending our varying facades right now in color tones into one consistent palette. There are areas on the backside, I don't know if the team went into the alley and reviewed it. There are actually some unpainted areas which will remain unpainted into the future. Those masonry areas, it's again an all brick building. Those brick facades will be tuck pointed and refinished as well, but not painted. There are other areas along the side. Most of this is Jill is aware of through some of our conversation and submissions to her. Most of those, if not all of them, with the exception of what we have in front of you today, will be under staff purview for approval. Around the alley side, there's some real wonky details. They basically have functionally a 2x10 or 2x12 running down as a guard, a bumper rail, if you will, going down the alley. We do want to come up with a better solution than a 2x12 running down the alleyway. What that is something we'll work with Jill to determine a little bit more intelligently. Did you find the photo?
No.
Yeah, even there's a intermediate cornice section at the midpoint of that elevation as well, which I think is essentially a 1x. There's some original, which is interesting because it did expose some original detailing underneath that. There are, on that facade, we can't find any evidence on the primary facade, but on the alley facade, there's actually some stone sills that are still intact. So removing that is a wonderful opportunity just to expose some of the original materiality too. We didn't do an incredibly invasive exercise in terms of getting behind into it. These are still functioning restaurants. What we could do is we pulled off sections of the facade. We did discover through that exercise, one, out of all of that entire storefront, one remaining steel column, cast iron column, excuse me. Our intent is to leave that exposed and build the new storefront system around it to recognize and give homage to its original state. One of the concerns, if we get more deeply into some of your questions regarding or thoughts or concerns that Jill identified regarding our storefronts and the transom conditions, one of the elements that we were able to identify is there appears to be new steel beam members that were installed at some point that are lower than the original transom heights. They would be somewhere in between or interstitial to that original transom, which renders it almost impossible to restore to, or reconstruct, I should say, to the original geometry with that transom section. We're still nodding towards it by identifying that. It's just not transparent glass, of course. Materiality. I was going to get, I saw you waiting patiently. The materiality, the primary building material for most of the elements will be a series of different wood panels, all painted. The wood backdrop, some are raised sections, some are recessed or routed sections to give just an element of flourish of detail, particularly along the base. There's going to be, some of the older photos, Jill, that you had up, it's kind of an odd grade that runs along. It's actually dropping, running from from east to west. It drops about 1.5 feet, actually. Hence the reason for an internalized ramp in the Tian Chu space. That there is, you can see in that photograph right there, there's actually a concrete curb that runs along there. So some of that has been lost, some of that is buried. We're going to not restore it, but make that just a continuous datum along the base so that we're actually bringing our storefront sections, our wood storefront areas down to it. The windows themselves, because owing to the size and scale of them, are being proposed as contemporary aluminum storefront. So, any other, please?
The glazing, is it clear glazing or is
Clear.
it tinted or?
Clear, yes.
Joe, can you go to the star photo from 73? Yeah, so that one, I could see, you guys wanted to carry the band across with the dentals and all that.
Yes.
But here, I could see that there's 2 little brackets right above the entry, and you don't show that on your rendering. Is the intention to include those brackets or not?
It's not.
Okay.
And I should point out, the doors, and again, in a perfect world, we would have aligned the storefront exactly and magically as it was depicted in this photograph. It's a very simple but elegant storefront proportionally and geometrically. However, that door in the center is actually the access door to the upper level that has been widened or slightly moved since its original point of construction. I think you may see it in that plan. So that entire entry is slightly askew. That's our biggest challenge in moving it around. I should point out, as I'm looking at just pieces of this right now, there's a really beautiful mechanical vent coming up out of the colloquially termed Jimmy John's building. The owner has been already coordinating and negotiating with a mechanical contractor to inboard that and bring it right up to an existing vertical shaft, which will by itself, with nothing else going on, be a tremendous improvement to the facades.
That looks nice.
Was there any attempt to bring back the transom windows above?
The transoms are a real challenge because, as I mentioned, from our minimally invasive exploration of the existing conditions, there are new steel members that have been installed. There are columns that have been removed. Most of the lower base, in fact, is now what most likely was just open, if possibly. Actually, no, I take that back. We did find evidence of original brick behind some of that. Utilitarian, of course, just some brick substrate. But most of it is now contemporary concrete block. So, long and short to that, they basically removed almost everything except that one column, and through that process, rebuilt the entire structure along the storefront.
Right, any other questions for the applicant?
Do you want to make any
Please.
comments on the light fixtures that, we were talking about light fixtures earlier?
Well, I am on the record, so I have to support my client's request to install the fixtures. We did work their original thought was true barn-type fixtures, and we were able to track down, I think it's a Baga series, relatively expensive, but a little bit more contemporary-looking barn light, if you will. I don't have a critical aversion to them. They are rather, well, even worse versions of those are festooned all around downtown Ann Arbor, directly below my office window. Up until a few days ago, there were about 3 of them at Ben and Jerry's. They're still there, I'm just not. So I don't know, I'm not necessarily averse to them. I have a personal fondness, I have to admit, for a light fixture similar to the Piata, for instance, a much more sedate, direct, bit glow along the signage areas. But I will have to support the petitioner's, my client's request. So odd way of saying yes, I guess that we like them.
Any other questions? All right. Moving
you.
on to the public hearing. Are there members of the public who would like to speak on this agenda item? Nope. All right, I'll now close the public hearing portion, and you may please be seated. Thank you. Would any commissioners like to make a motion on the application? Commissioner Rocco.
Just have to find it, hold on. Where is it? Okay. I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 613 to 619 East William Street, a contributing property in the East William Historic District, to install new storefronts along the extent of the 2-story building and replace a side door facing East William Street on 342 South State in the existing opening on the following condition: that sign lighting is limited to 2 fixtures on the signs on 613 and 619, 1 on 617, and none on the 2 bracket signs. The work as conditioned is compatible in exterior design, arrangement, texture, material, and relationship to the rest of the building and the surrounding area, and meets the Ann Arbor Historic District design guidelines for storefronts, windows, and signs, and the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, in particular standards 1, 2, and 9, and the guidelines for storefronts, windows, and building site.
Support.
Seconded by Commissioner White. Is there a discussion on the motion? How about we parse it out if there's discussion areas? We could start with the lighting part on the motion. So I'm trying to find portions of the interior guidelines or the Ann Arbor Historic District guidelines speaking directly towards lighting specifics. I see stuff about signs. I don't see stuff directly about the lighting. Is that now in a lighting guide thing? Jill's checking.
So
There
lighting,
is a section in the guidelines.
there
Yes,
is.
there is. It's just not in our staff packet.
Yeah.
I don't put everything in there.
Yeah, I
but
know.
we have 15-page long
That's why we have this.
staff reports. All right, so the design guidelines for signs talk about installing signage that is lit from external light fixtures above or below the sign is appropriate. And
Not appropriate.
installing signs that have interior illumination or are backlit. And then on the sticky note addition that the commissioners made at a past retreat, it says not appropriate is using gooseneck lights with large shades similar to barn lights to illuminate signs. And appropriate is lighting signage using fixtures that are as small and inconspicuous as possible. So those are more of a past policy, so you can, just something else to consider.
What's the rationale for saying that there's no barn lights? I don't remember what that was.
Because barn lighting wasn't typically used in downtown
Right.
buildings in Ann Arbor.
Just not appropriate
Right,
to the,
right. And people often feel like it is historic.
yeah,
So it's sort of a false historicism.
Right.
That you didn't usually find in downtown.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there weren't a couple of barn lights here and there, but it was not used as a primary light source on the
similar
fronts
to
of
the
buildings.
split rail fence in the suburban
Sort of,
areas.
sort of.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, and probably don't want to give, even, I guess even if there were that type of fixture used previously, is it creating a false sense of history? Like, it's a
It
ye-old
could.
fixture, but this is modern storefront, so.
Yeah, so the question here is also, well, we're allowing a bunch, and so what's the differentiation between allowing 2, 4, 6, or 9, right? what you want.
You're the light level guy.
Well, light level, I'd say no at all, but.
It
I'm
is
trying
very
to do
bright
this
over there at
visually. It is
night, I
bright,
will say.
especially with the streetlights, so,
Yeah.
you know, are they necessary? Well, no, probably not, especially with the streetlights, but, you know, do they meet the guidelines?
I think the goal is to light the sign. I mean, you know, the tenants, they're gonna want sign lighting,
Yeah.
for sure. And so, I feel like these fixtures are a modern version of a gooseneck barn light. They don't look like a
It's not a-
replica historic light to me. Whether I like them or not is beside the point, but to me, these look like contemporary lights. They just don't have the look of the gooseneck barn light to me.
Yeah.
They're not, I would prefer that they were had like the full cutoff or whatever it's called, where the shade comes down a little, the bulb
it
sticks
covers the
down,
bulb.
and so there'll be like some light pollution to the neighbors. That's if I was gonna
Yeah.
take a knock on this light, it'd be that, I guess. But I don't think we've adopted the Dark Skies Initiative lighting plan yet, so it still passes, I think.
And I guess the post-it came up as a retreat discussion as a general policy, but hasn't been enacted within the guidelines. Is that accurate too?
Yeah, yeah.
And so what I read as the motion, there's 2 lights on this elevation that we're looking at that would have to be removed. The one on the far left that's over the blade sign, and then the one right there, one of those 2 would have to go if we approve the motion as I read it. So I would, just playing, thinking from the tenant's point of view, maybe that one blade sign is gonna be way out there,
On its own.
not as well lit, let's say, as the rest of the signs.
And it would be, so it says here that none on the 2 bracket signs.
Right.
So there is a bracket sign right next to the sign above the door. And, oh, it's that one?
Oh, are there 3 bracket signs?
Oh, there's a
No.
bracket,
Oh, yeah.
there's 3 bracket
on either
signs.
end.
I thought there was another bracket sign right in the middle.
There's one right in the middle
signage.
too, yeah.
Near
Go to the
near
other
the S of the
rendering.
sign.
Wait a second.
Middle.
There's a better,
I don't see it on here.
You can see it in the oh, it's
It's
not
one of the
called out.
images.
No,
Where'd it
it's
go?
on, I think it's on the colored drawing, but the color drawings are inconsistent
Oh.
with the
Okay.
elevation
Elevation.
We're
drawings.
basing off the elevation.
Yeah, the color drawings also had different numbers of light fixtures on some of them. I didn't include them all in the slideshow. if you
Go
look.
to the next
Okay.
one forward, that's like the blow-up version? No, that's back, yeah. So this is the blow-up of the
So we've
elevation,
got-
so I see 1,
Eight here.
2, oh, okay.
yeah, so
Just
the
at the
drawings are labeled as A, B, and those are the blade signs. And there's only one on the far right and the far left
Okay.
for the elevation. Okay. So as the motion is written, it's removing those 2 lights from those blade signs. Even though the elevation doesn't particularly show a blade sign above the far right-hand one, it does show, or I'm sorry, it does not show a light above the blade sign. On the right-hand side, it does on the left-hand side. This image is hard to see on the screen, but in your packet, it's printed out pretty well to show there's one there, not one there. Yeah, so, yeah,
I guess part of that is still, we're in support of the selected fixture.
the selected fixture, yeah. Yeah, and I could see Commissioner Rockland's point of view too, that this is reminiscent of a barn, but it's a barn fixture, but it's a contemporary interpretation of that, shortened neck, different brow, all that sort of thing. In terms of the numbers of them, less is more always for me, but in terms of the standards, we don't really have a standard that dictates too much, too little. Yeah.
The only thing I'd have you keep in mind is that sign lighting is supposed to light the sign.
It's supposed to light the sign.
Yeah,
Mhm.
not the whole
Blade sign,
building.
Blade, yeah, I don't know.
And there are 2 street lamps.
There are street lamps.
They're tall ones. They're not
Yeah.
pedestrian ones, but they're tall ones. There's one about here, and there's one just across the alley right here.
Yeah, so in terms of like, also what Commissioner Racklin mentioned about, a tenant likes their sign nicely lit. And the signage that is over the doorways certainly are the ones that are fairly well lit according to this design. And the blade signs, well, they get a decent amount of lighting either direction, but how much lighting do they really need? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
just,
that's totally the right
listening to
input.
staff, Jill, your comment, like this, the sign lighting is supposed to light the sign. I mean, I don't think that's what this kind of light is not sign lighting, right? I mean, this type of light, it sends light in all directions.
It does.
Um,
Especially
so-
with that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know then, what is this? If this is supposed to be sign lighting, then it's not
It's not
really
functioning as
so
such.
effective at that. It's doing a lot of other stuff besides sign lighting. So is there something, though, in the standards where we can say that this light's not appropriate because it's not,
It's lighting the building.
it's lighting the
It's
building, it's gonna be
sign-
light the
it's lighting the
sidewalk, it's gonna light the street,
Excessively lighting.
so.
And I think that's where I thought removing a couple fixtures would at least tone that down a little bit. It's a big building, it's long.
Yeah,
You think of the Tian Chu restaurant, that sign's going to take up almost that whole bay, though
Right.
here it's going to be constricted to just that area.
yeah. I'm okay with having the blade sign removed, the blade sign lighting removed, and just keep the signs over the tenants intact and keeping that. I see your
As
point about trying to
condition.
tone it down a little. And we have 7 fixtures, tone it down to 6, I don't know.
Well, the motion tones it down to 5.
Five.
Because
Yeah.
that one
It does.
The one in
but
the
I'm
center
for the- What's that?
is
Right.
not as wide.
You're saying that
The motion is stating just one fixture
One there.
over there.
at the
Yeah,
center.
So it would have to
sign.
relocate and center.
If you look at the color rendering, I think it's the first color rendering, it shows a different pattern of lighting with just one fixture over each.
Oh, yeah.
There it is.
Oh, one on each.
One at
Yeah.
each.
But that's not
If you will.
consistent with the elevations, so I take the elevations as what's proposed.
Okay.
But
Okay.
that gives you a sense
That
of,
gives you
what it would look
looks
like
like.
installed.
Right, 'cause
On
that
the other
one
rendering,
also
it's-
shows a light over that blade sign,
Right.
which the other one did not.
Yeah.
It does.
There. Yeah, blade sign.
It's a model
Is there one
thing.
over the blade sign there?
No, not, well, not.
But we're
where
going
your
off the,
housing
we're
is
going
at.
Because there's a
No.
housing.
off the elevations.
There's
as
one
part of the
here.
motion.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the motion has to tie to the actual elevations, not to the rendering. Or any of the renderings.
Well, it's a condition, so, I mean,
Yeah.
if we're.
But are they proposing, okay, but in the motion, I didn't say if they're gonna get 2 blade signs or 3 blade signs. So
Because
I
2
guess
are
we have-
shown.
2 are shown in the elevation, but
Yeah.
3 are shown in the rendering. So I guess we're approving 2 or 3 unless we
No.
change the motion.
No, we're using
No,
the
we have to
elevation.
use
We
the
only use
elevation.
the elevation. That's what always stands in the application.
Not the
What's
render.
shown
So
on
we
the
don't have to
elevation.
modify the motion, it's just.
Correct.
It's known that the elevation
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
Over.
trumps.
You can
yes,
add things
supersedes.
into the motion if you want to allow, say, a third blade sign.
Right, okay,
But,
I get it, I get it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But if there's ever a conflict in the future, I will go back and
The
look only at the
drawings.
elevation drawings. Yeah.
So the motion's okay?
So far.
Okay. Are we ready to vote?
No, we've just discussed.
Oh, that's just the lighting.
Talked about lighting, huh?
All right.
Well, I don't know if we
What's
resolved
another
Did we resolve
area?
lighting?
I don't know if we resolved.
I don't know if we've resolved it. We're just gonna have to, we're just gonna vote on it, I suppose.
Okay.
are we gonna?
Do we want to talk about, is there anything else?
What's the, I guess we have to kind of gauge the flavor of the vote too, as to whether or not the motion needs to change as a result, but
With
Guessing.
regard to lighting.
yeah, in regard to lighting. But we can talk about other topics before we do that, or?
Yeah, maybe let's talk about other topics and then gauge the flavor.
Yeah. All right, so other topics. What other issues do we have here? All right, so the transom, no transom being inserted. To me, this is all non-original. What's there is non-original, so we're replacing it with non-original. This is kind of a nod to what's there, so I'm okay with the fact that there's not a transom being repeated there.
Sounds good.
Any
Yeah.
discussion on that part? All right, next part. What's another part that we're missing?
I would say the material
Material.
of the, I mean, usually we see, or not usually, but I feel like we see a lot of like stone facade in the storefront. This is wood. We have seen some wood, I guess, but I guess the good thing that I'm seeing is that it looks like it's picked up off the ground, so there's a concrete curb that's, I think, 10.5 inches or something like that. So I feel like that's probably high enough so that, you know, there won't be a lot of deterioration. You know, painted wood right down to the sidewalk would obviously be a bad idea, but this seems like it's well thought out. I think it'll be like, it'll look, I think, unique to the other new storefronts that we've seen that have been more maybe to the modern side than this with painted wood will, you know, I think it'll have a nice look, you know, or a different look. They're all nice, but.
Any other areas for discussion?
I think it's appropriate what they did with the cornice restoration and new construction where, you know, where there's evidence, they're restoring what was there, and then where there's not evidence, they're doing a similar yet simplified version.
Yep. I do really like too, like you can't see it on this elevation, but on existing photos, the big kind of brow of each of the windows and how the shading effect that it has on them, and time of year that they have that. Oh, that's pretty cool. And I appreciate that that they're unifying the elevation again so that the whole bracket and cornice above the transom is just being carried across. You know, I think that'll help the window, this facade out a lot. That's pretty exciting. All right, any other discussion?
I do have one clarifying question. All of the windows are shown as double hung, and currently some are single fixed. Is that for a future application when you're doing more detail work?
You are referencing the upper stories, obviously.
Yeah.
Which is not at the table tonight, but
Okay.
yes, we're not asking for, or petitioning in this evening for any window replacement.
Okay.
There is obviously a long-term master plan that would ideally likewise include window replacement on all of the elevations. That is not part of this evening's discussion, though.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other last questions, discussions? No. All right, are we ready to vote? Sounds right. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes.
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 All those opposed, please say no. All right, the motion carries. Your application has been approved, and you will receive written notification from staff. Please note that you must apply for any permits from the city before beginning your project. All right, thank you very much.
Cheers.
Oh,
Oh.
look at that.
I'm not going to
Thanks.
Get us back to
hold up
find the bike.
the significant improvement.
From the job site.
I'll get,
Oh, nice. Good thing we're sitting.
I think we're on to G, new business now, right? What's that?
Is that yours?
No.
No, someone left it in the audience.
Oh, somebody left it
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
I'm
Right.
gonna get the jet.
That concludes our F for hearings. We got, all right, Anna's back. G, new business, no new business. Moving on to H, approval of minutes. I think there's some minutes in here for the draft for the August 15th.
yeah, it's online.
All right. Anyone have any adjustments to the minutes or anything? All right. Hearing no objection, the minutes are approved as presented. Moving on to I, reports from commissioners. Any reports? All right. On to assignments. Willing to serve on the review committee, which meets noon, doesn't it?
That is noon, this is a misprint.
Is it noon? October.
Yes.
Is it noon?
Yep, October 7th at noon.
We start the new one?
I can do it.
Yeah, we're making the
Okay,
shifting.
Dave's in.
Okay.
October what?
I'm back, available.
Got one?
I have nothing on my calendar, so I guess I can do it.
Anybody else? Commissioner Beeson's been doing an awful lot of these lately.
Last call.
I can maybe do it. I might be a little bit late, that's my only,
To noon?
yeah,
How late?
not too late. I have a construction meeting before then, so.
There's
I should
always
be
run late.
finished, yeah. It's at 10, so there should be plenty of time.
Always
Okay,
run late.
You know.
Okay.
I
If,
have the M Club every Monday until March.
Okay, so Bob's out.
so Anna, I'm going to put you down. If you think you're going to have a problem, let us know, and I'll get in touch with John. And,
It's on my calendar.
and if
so-
you're running late, I'll choose a downtown location or something to
Okay.
meet at first. Okay, thank you both.
All right, moving on to K, reports from staff. Do we have a staff activities?
We do. There's one, HCC 19-155 is to install a generator behind a house on West William Street. That got approved, but then the contractor didn't like the location, and they were gonna move it someplace else, and now they're asking to move it to the front of the house, not in front of the house, but just around the corner next to the front of the house, which would have to be an HDC application. We've never had anybody ask for a generator near the front of the house, but I'm thinking that it wouldn't meet any of the standards and guidelines, and I don't know why that particular location is preferred. The application just came in today, I haven't even talked to him yet about it. So I'll be advising them that I won't be able to support it there, and that it's an unlikely location, given the guidelines and everything. So we'll see where that goes.
How do generators, well, this is a side comment, but how do generators fall under the noise ordinance? Because
80 decibels,
80?
that's what you get, you get 80
They're
decibels.
growing lower dBs every day.
That was loud.
Yeah.
All right. Never a restless evening. Concern, well, that can fall under my concerns of commission. M for communications, any M for communications?
Nope,
None?
nope.
All right. I think I'm done here. Then there being no further business, and without objection, I adjourn the September 12th, 2019 Ann Arbor Historic District Commission meeting.
I was
Well done.
review committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall, for filling me in.